Well, welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a good lunch break if you're on the West Coast, or dinner break if you're on the East Coast. Matt Canik here again with coverage of the 2023 Scrabble Players Championship. This afternoon, I will be joined by a voice that is familiar to many of you, as he led the stream last year for this same tournament, and that is Morris Greenberg. Morris, happy to have you on. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I've tried to catch the action from your amazing commentary with others throughout this, and from what I've seen, it's been an amazing tournament. Really excited to follow these three pivotal games to determine the second finalist tomorrow.
Yeah, it'll be exciting for sure. For those of you missing the action earlier, we will be taking the top two players at the end of play today and putting them in a best of five finals. And Josh Sokol, with a ridiculous 21-4 record, has already clinched one of those two spots. Jackson Smylie and this ridiculous hat look to do just that as well right here, with a win over Carl Johnson and a little bit of additional help from two other matchups. Jackson could potentially clinch a spot this round. If not, a loss from Jackson opens up a whole lot of possibilities, and a win from one of two other players in the NWL field could result in basically that player playing Jackson two times to see who's going to get that final spot. It looks like Jackson will indeed be paired with Carl Johnson. There's been a bit of a controversy. A lot of players, I think, are vying for the opportunity to play Jackson, as many players in this field sitting three games behind him want that opportunity to beat him three times and take their spot in the finals instead. Jackson's record is not 21-4. We'll get that updated. Jackson at
Yeah.
18-7 will be playing Carl Johnson, three games behind him at 15-10. But two players, two games behind Jackson, Joey Malik and Kevin Fraley, with Andy Huang 2.5 games behind, and a pack of multiple players 3 games behind with 3 games to play. We've got Noah Walton, Carl Johnson, Ed de Guzman, Ian Weinstein, and Eric Harshbarger from the C division, or C class rather, all up at 15-10. I believe this will be the correct pairing, though. Jackson versus Carl, and that's the action we're going to bring you. Exciting stuff, lots at stake here.
Yeah, I noticed Eric, the last person you mentioned, he was 4-8 and has gone on an 11-2 run since. So that just tells you, right? Nationals is a really long tourney, and there are other people who've had great runs. I think Michael Fagan, last year's winner, started off really poorly, went 7-0 yesterday. So yeah, it's for even for these people who right might be out of contention now. You still want to perform really well in these last three games, but if you're one of these few people that Matt just named, I mean, your heart's probably pounding at this point. You really want to deliver, and for some people, that means rising to the occasion, and right, the adrenaline gives them that extra boost they need. But it's also a high stress environment, so and very few tournaments are of this structure where every game is this sort of crucial um, impact into what your destiny is for the finals.
Yeah, no, this will be really exciting. A lot of players control their own destiny right now. 3 wins and the correct pairings, and anybody could take that second spot to face Josh tomorrow in that best of 5 finals. We will be back with coverage of that best of finals tomorrow. So tune in bright and early tomorrow for more coverage from us. If Jackson does put this thing away with 1 or 2 games remaining, we will switch over likely to Collins, if not to another division, just to show y'all a game with some stakes. But with that, we are underway. Carl with a key blank already on his opening rack in a do or die game for him. ADEIOK blank. And a close to several bingos, but no cigar here, as Carl to decide how he wants to approach this rack. 24 points available to him, retaining the blank with the play of Oaked, O-A-K-E-D, or he can keep things smaller, Oka, Koi, or Koa, K-O-A, or K-O-I, as other candidate plays. So does Carl opt for 10 additional points with a little bit of volatility on his rack, or does he keep things tighter with Koi, Koa, or Oka? Morris, how do you feel about those options?
I mean, my tendency is just to play a bit shorter. I kind of like the game to develop slowly and see, right. I don't want it to open up too fast and let it get out of hand without even having the chance to make my stamp on it. But that's my preferences. I mean, all of these will simulate very closely, and really whatever Carl's most comfortable with, that should be what he plays as I see it. So I might opt for Koi, but yeah, that's just my preference.
I think in this situation, I might play Oka OKA just to avoid giving Jackson easy stacking opportunities. Oaked a perfectly reasonable play as well for 24. I've seen Carl in general favor keeping better leaves over scoring points in the immediate term. So I expect probably Koi, Koa, or Oka to come down. And right on cue, Carl playing the same play I would make here. OKA 14 points, but a great leave. Carl probably 70 to 80% to bingo, depending on his pull, as play passes over to Jackson, who has AABEGIY. And Jackson, not super thrilled with this rack, but Oka is going to give him great stacks. YAGI underneath, a good defensive play, 25 points, and probably one of the better leaves he can hold, ABE. Not going to hold anything great with the wreck this garbage, but that's about the best he can do. So I expect Yagi to be Jackson's play, as Carl draws quite poorly into DEI, doubling up his E's and his I's.
Yeah, this will be interesting to see the response here after Yagi. I mean, Carl doesn't need to hit panic at all yet. It's a very tight board right now, but that often means there's a lot of time for all quadrants to sort of develop. So yeah, I'm guessing he's going to just dump an E and I and probably the H too, but at a minimum the E and the I and something with that.
Yeah, so no bingos available for Carl. He'll spend a little time here. That AG certainly looks like you might have an AGE bingo, but not in the cards for him. And I bet Carl here plays HIE and HAG. HIE does take a D as a back hook, Carl retaining a D, and I bet he gambles again with that DEI blank leave, hopefully hitting a bingo the second time around. Anything else you see here, Morris?
Yeah, I guess it is interesting to consider high versus hide, right? Sticking the D there as well, HIED. I'm not sure right away. Like Yagi, it's unclear to me what inference you can make from that, but if you know Jackson as a player very well and have strong inclinations that he might be keeping an S with that, you might play HIED. Um, but I think either makes sense depending on your read here.
Yeah, running a Quackle simulation, HIE bingos over 70% of the time next turn for Carl. I'd imagine his percentage was fairly similar last turn. So, rather frustrating miss for him, as we'll see if he's able to pull a bingo this time around. ABENSTV for Jackson as we watch Carl pick up another H, another D, and an A. I believe this, with words like die hard, will bingo for Jackson or for Carl, depending on Jackson's play here. Jackson looking probably to shed a B or a V, but not any compelling way to get rid of both. And he'll have to burn his S to score a reasonable amount of points. A play of AB or SAB on top of high stands out as a good option, as well as the 5 Vesta, VESTA, forming Shag, TI, and AE for 32. Those to me are the top candidate plays. If I'm Jackson, I want to block up this board, but there's not a great way for me to do that with the letters I have. Maybe VET through the E and high, but that HAG spot, if Carl has a bingo, he could bingo there if he's got an S. So not sure how Jackson's going to approach this. Vet looks good, but if Carl has an S, it's useless and you've squandered equity. Otherwise, Vesta or Sab or just Ab looking a standout plays to me.
Yeah, I tend to like Ab here. I mean, it not only does it score well compared to a lot of those other plays, and I guess Sab scores even better. But vents as a leave, if you draw a vowel, it is bingoing a fair amount. It is obstructing the double lane. It not quite as much as vet, but it's sort of like the Goldilocks of all of these options between scoring, blocking, and leaving. It does a bit of everything, and it's not too committal towards any one of them. I feel like such that it could give Jackson artillery for next turn, maybe.
Yeah, this is a tricky turn for Jackson, and traditionally this tournament we've seen him play longer out of these racks in situations where it makes sense to play short or long. Jackson almost always electing to turn over more tiles, but nothing else has quite the same defensive power as a play like Vet. And I know Jackson certainly likes to play defense, and against a player like Carl, who's got great word knowledge, that's the way I would choose to approach this game. But I'm so nervous. Does Carl have an S? I need to think back to the last few plays. Has anything he's done indicated he's more likely than average to have a blank? Clearly, he's keeping bingo tiles, but what are those? Jackson is dropping A, B down, electing to hold on to the S. Conventional wisdom is that an S is worth about 9 points. He would score exactly 9 points by setting it down, but on this board, which is rather tight, I think the S a little bit more useful than on average. And so that I think the reason why Jackson elects to hold on to it. Carl will be able to bingo back. Die Hard and HIED is easily his best option. In fact, Die Hard is the only 7 in this rack, and it plays in just 2 spots with Hide or underneath the Aggie with ID. But 80 is way more than 66, and it's a more defensive play. Carl to bingo with Die Hard for 80, barring just a very strange whiff that I would not expect Carl to make in a million years.
Yeah, I think assuming that Carl gets the Die Hard spot you're mentioning, Matt, I think the only thing that I've disagreed with in this game is Jackson changing his hat. I feel like at this point in the tournament, it's very risky to make that wardrobe change. It's so
Yeah,
maybe he'll
Jackson's had a
recover from
very
that.
tough run on the stream, so perhaps trying to mix things up. Maybe he won it in a poker game over the break. Who knows? But in either case, perhaps the hat change a good move for Jackson, as he now has pulled into a bingo. ENSTV yields an IS, and he has invests, which plays with diehards. He'll have to choose which spot to play it in. It is 76 points if this last S hooks Die Hard, 74 if the first S hooks Die Hard, and I expect him to choose the higher scoring option shifted further over to the left out of this for defensive considerations. Do you have a thought on that, Morris? Which spot to play invests in?
So I guess yeah, it depends on what your objectives are. Just because, so the considerations here are one of the invest spots allows for more bingos, right? If you do the more right invests using the first S to hook diehards, you're just floating an extra S lane. So if you, for whatever reason, think you want to have that option available, then that might be good. The other one, I think that would put an E right below right above the triple word score, though. So that could yield some immediate bounce back plays immediately for Carl. So it really just depends on, I think, what your objectives are for the rest of the game and what you think Carl's strengths could be with 7 random tiles. Yeah, I'm guessing Jackson has better instincts for that than I do. But for instance, we can see on Carl's rack he would have Fieriest if Jackson plays the indents more to the right. So that sort of just shows the huge possible downsides there.
Carl not going to bingo because of Jackson's placement of invests, but he will still have an
Yeah.
easy, obvious, no-brainer play of FIE underneath EF, SI, and TE. Going to score him a lot of points, 37, and undouble the E's and the I's, holding the bingo prone and dangerous EIRT leave. Holding that R, especially to front hook AI, making RAI, is quite powerful on this board. And Carl in prime shape to pull another bingo here as Jackson pulls into some garbage. GOPSTWZ. No great options for Jackson. Perhaps TIZ, through the I in diehards for 27, perhaps WHOP, or perhaps G blank OW through the R in diehards, but nothing good here at all, unless I'm missing something.
I don't think you are, but this is the sort of position I could imagine Jackson taking a bit of time with, not only because there isn't a really inspiring option right away, but if you start to look at the board, this bottom part of the board is getting pretty clunky pretty quickly. And Jackson, I think his instincts and his thoughts on board dynamics during a game are basically how the game will unfold. He really thinks about that a lot, from my understanding, and I'm guessing given how this game's unfolding already and the score is, fairly close, he really will want to be very intentional about how he wants the board to be shaped the next few turns.
Yeah, this is going to be a big play in terms of determining where this board does and doesn't go. WHOP would set up Jackson's S as well as the one unseen S in the pool, which is perhaps a good idea, though the leave of GZST, not very solid. TIZ is going to ensure this board ends up significantly more closed, and GOPSW, also not a great leave. So Jackson's stuck holding bad tiles, almost independent of his play. Does he try to set up the S and ensure a more open game, or does he try to tighten things up against Carl, who maybe struggles a little bit more on tight boards than on open ones?
Well, I think right now he might be opting towards GIP, GIP through the I in diehards. Maybe he thinks that's the most enticing scoring spot right now, so he'd want to block it, and it still sets up his S for the next turn.
It does set up the S as well. It does only score 15, and OSTWZ not incredible for him. But again, no
It,
good leads.
it will score points the next turn, most likely. It won't get a bingo right away, but it scores with those
It,
letters.
WZ actually has reasonable synergy together, as far as I understand, with the presence of both whiz and was as short words that can net you a lot of points. And yet, whiz and was do not fit anywhere great on this board. I'm not seeing any good pulls that Jackson can have to help the W score well after a play like Jip. And I think he is kind of thinking better of it and looking at other options here. I think I'd like the play of WOP, WHOP, the most for Jackson, but that GSZ together, just not very good.
Yeah, it's as we were maybe expecting, he's definitely in a bit of a think tank here. Uh, it will be, yeah, I wonder what he's kind of going back and forth towards. He hasn't put the G, like he's swapped the G with the P at this point. Is there any reason we could see why he'd want to keep the G specifically?
Not that I see, no. And here we go. WOP is indeed the play Jackson elects to make. I'm a fan of this play, and we'll see what Jackson able to pull as Carl now into EIRT picks up an N, which is great, but also unfortunately the dreaded UY combination, and he'll have to figure out what to do out of this. There are fishing opportunities from the blank R. He could simply drop RYU for 10 points, holding the very bingo oriented EINRT leave. But aside from front hooking AI with his R, not really many bingo opportunities on this board. And in fact, he's shutting down one of his best other opportunities, that floating R. So I wonder if Carl elects to fish here. Perhaps he also drops those same two tiles to the P, forming Yup, trying to open things up just a smidge and also address the hook that Jackson has set up. Or maybe he plays significantly longer and tries to score points. He has Typier, TYP, IER through the P for 30 points. So maybe he elects to go big and score big. He's also got other scoring options such as ternary through the R in diehards, so TURNERY, or triune underneath invests, TRIUNE. A ternary would score 26, triune for 25. Now, I'm not sure what we're going to see from Carl here. A longer play to score points or a tight short play trying to bingo next turn.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's an in-between option. What about like Puny keeping, I guess, his exact same leave as before? Just because the AI is the best bingo spot on the board at this point, I guess, aside from the S spot Jackson just opened up, but right, AI can take an R front hook. So if he is gearing up towards a bingo, he might want to score some points, but also keep that specific ER leave.
Yeah, I do like Puny a little bit more than the Ryu, the selling out aggressively for the fish. But I think if I'm Carl here in a tight game like this, I'm less inclined to try to bingo and more inclined to score. I like the play of Typier a lot. The U, not a good tile. Three more U's in the bag, but 30 points, a lot more than I'm going to get with some of these other plays. And I'm not sure I want to put it up to the tile bag to try to draw a bingo.
Yeah, I mean, one other thing to keep in mind is Jackson took a fairly long time last turn, and he played. And it, I don't know. Do you think that would indicate, or would that set alarm bells off for Carl at all and shape how he might approach this turn?
Yeah, absolutely. Against some players, when they take longer on their turn, I think that means they have a blank and they're really taking their time to try to anagram and find the best words with that blank. But Jackson, not really one of those players. He anagrams so quickly, finds the words so quickly that when he spends more time, it's probably because he has a tough decision. So Jackson spending more time, especially what we've seen from this tournament, to me implies he's torn between setting up an S or not. And here does come Puny down, at least partially obstructing the S spot that Jackson has set up, but also scoring okay, 18 points, and holding EIRT. So a nice play here by Carl. I may have opted to play Typier, but this is absolutely defensible as well, as Jackson picks up the second blank in this game, but also a load of garbage. D, F, G, S, T, Z, blank. And we'll have a really interesting decision here as Jackson can burn that blank in non bingo plays. Gifted for 48 points through the eye and Die Hard holds SZ. Gift or gifts in the same spot makes some sense. Ditzes for 54 through that eye holds FG, or he can simply drop Tiz, as we discussed last turn, through that spot, TIZ. Lots of good plays. Morris, would you play the blank here, or would you play tight and elect to hold on to that blank for the future?
It's tight. Like I could really go either way. Um, I guess, yeah, it would depend. So Carl's last two plays were both three tiles. So maybe he's trying to gear up towards a bingo. So yeah, I mean it's tough. Like gifted statically or just based on raw points plus leave is probably the best option. But given Carl's kind of slower plays the last few turns, it might not be worth it to do that right away because you're just floating a lot of letters. Like in this case, for instance, you'd have dimetric if you
Yeah,
play
dimetric
gifted.
down from the D would be killer.
So yeah, I need to think a lot. I think it would depend a bit on what I think Carl's doing at this point, and my instincts here would be that Carl is playing a slower game after a play like Puny. Why am I just going to give up more stuff to that? And you might say, well, if you do something just like Gift, for instance, doesn't that also open up an S lane? Well, you already have the S lane for WAPs there, so it's not adding anything new per se.
Well,
And it would
Jackson
open
has
up the triple
gifted
even more.
Carl the 92-point dimetric, which Carl
Yeah.
sees almost immediately. And this has backfired on Jackson horrifically. He burns the blank, his good stuff, to try to take a lead on a tight board and gets absolutely railed. 92 points for Carl to put him up 255 to 191.
Yeah, it's a tough one, but this is what I was sort of nervous of. But to be fair, like I'm sitting here seeing Carl's tiles, so that's really easy to shape my opinion. I feel like it's kind of like in the World Series of Poker when you see the cards of both players and you see the person with the better hand fold. You're like, why did they do that? Well, because they don't know what the other person has. So I totally feel for Jackson here.
Yeah, it's a bad beat, but he's still very much in this game as that Z is going to allow him to score a lot of points, either zeros or Zoeas underneath invests extending to the triple. Both plays scoring 47 points. Can't complain about that. He could also look at playing Zoeas, Zoea, through the blank E in gifted, holding ERSS. But Jackson is wasting no time going to drop down zeros here, and I think I prefer Zoeas given the pool looks rather Val heavy. But he's going to opt to play zeros here instead, holding AS, and we'll see if he can dodge some of those vowels in the pool and try to draw a better rack next turn. BCRRTUU for Carl. I'm sure he wishes he had a slightly better post bingo draw, but the board opening that Jackson does can be quickly knocked out with a play like Curb and BIS for 21 points. The nice thing about that play for Carl, too, is it holds on to his R to keep that RAI spot available to get to the top of this board. I think Curb is the only real play that makes sense here, and I think we're going to see it from Carl pretty quick.
Yeah, one comment about zeros though is that I think the nice thing that it is the E and the R there are two of the best tiles to end eight-letter words with, whereas having an O instead of an R right in Zoeas isn't as nice for that. So maybe Jackson's starting to look at, uh, given that he's down and the board's pretty tight. He might have wanted those floaters available. That might have been his thought process there.
I
But
do
yeah, I think
agree,
Curb
but
looks really good here. Yeah.
had Jackson played Zoeas, he'd be sitting on a stellar rack right now with the spot to play it. Anyway, alas, you can't know what you're going to draw, but I don't like that play by Jackson. I see why he did it. I think it is to end words in E and an R, but it's a tight game. He's only down 17. I don't think you're so desperate you need those openings just quite yet.
Yeah, and that is a good point that the AI, like that might be the spot my eye keeps getting drawn to as this game keeps unfolding, just because um as the game unfolds, that lane will be somewhat hard to block and is a really nice seventh lane if you have the R. So yeah, the R might be a super valuable tile here in general. It'd be an interesting story to monitor.
And Jackson playing off that R when he didn't need to, I think is going to come back to haunt him. Even if he doesn't draw a play like Stellar, that R is so important to get back in this game. Carl holding one and only one more in the bag for Jackson to try to pull. So we'll keep watching that, but I do think zeros was a mistake by Jackson, and it may cost him here.
Yeah, and I think this just goes to show you, zooming out in the bigger picture, how tough Scrabble is sometimes, right? These are very minor decisions. The computer will maybe say at most these are like 0.5% win percentage difference, but this might be the game in at 0.5%. And players like Jackson who have played this game for so long, have really honed their craft, they will kick themselves over those 0.5% here and there. And so it's extremely tight margins of error that's going on here.
And it's unusual for Jackson to rush a play like that. Yeah, you're excited to play zeros, but I think had he spent more time to thought, he'd realize the value of the R and forego that play. Jackson usually a little bit more tactical and slow and methodical with his time, but we can dwell on that all day. Instead, we're going to look ahead to Carl's rack. He's got a 14-point lead, DOOPRTU here, and Carl with an interesting decision to make. Several long plays to work his way out of this rack, play down to the T and gifted, drop out and outport, as well as uproot are all good options for him. Unseen though, no blanks, but a J, a Q, and an X all in the bag. Are those going to be valuable or Trojan horses? I don't know. Carl also has to decide, do I want to play long and kind of open that board, or do I want to keep things very tight? He can play just PUD to the D in Die Hard, forming PSI and UTE, both controversial words for existing. I know UT is a kind of copy pasta, and PSI, pounds per square inch, perhaps an acronym that doesn't deserve to be in the lexicon. But they are valid plays. Will Carl keep things tight, or will he play down to that T with one of his longer words? One extra option for him instead of PUD is using those same two tiles to play pubis, Pubis, to the BIS. That'll knock out the R floating out there for Jackson to bingo to, but I think Carl doesn't quite have a big enough lead to start knocking out lanes at this juncture. So I like the play of uproot a little more than these other options. I'm not sure how to approach this turn, though. Morris, what thoughts do you have?
So is ODOUR a word? I always mix up some of these 5-letter
It
words. I
is.
think it is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I might even consider that to block RAI at this point. All of these plays have they're all like mid-scoring plays, have kind of okay leaves, and I'd put that among those, even if it's not the tip top of those by static evaluation. But the advantage of that is you're probably getting rid of the most volatile lane. So I might opt for that. And also, I guess, yeah, all the blanks are out, so turnover might not be as important, but something like that I definitely consider as well.
I stand corrected. A PSI is not pounds per square inch. That's the chemistry teacher in me talking. PSI is a Greek letter. All of those Greek letters are valid. So thanks for correcting me in chat, Dave. I appreciate it. We're not going to lead people astray with fake news. Carl is indeed looking at Odori, thinking about closing this board. There are 2 R's unseen to him, so maybe it's important for him to try to hit that spot before. Odor, maybe not the best closing or defensive play, but at least you can make that spot go away and have less to worry about in the future. So that's what Carl opts to do here. I don't know that I like that, but I think this is one of those turns where you'll never know what exactly the right thing to do is. And now Jackson,
Well,
potential to
I
respond.
give that 2 thumbs up though. So we're
Yeah,
disagree.
yeah, we can agree to
On
disagree,
average,
and that's
1
the
thumb up.
beauty
Yeah.
of this game. And now Jackson, JOG, plays on top of Odur, either with 3 overlaps, JOOD and GO, or just to the O, 26 or 25 points. Also has SAJOU down to the U in Odur. And while stringing that S out on that top triple to bingo to or from is volatile, that play would give Jackson the lead. So I don't know what Jackson to do here. Jog looks like a great play. ALNS, a good leave, but there are 2 more L's and 3 more N's and 2 more A's for Jackson to draw. And bingoing, not great on this board. Let's put up the unseen pool as Jackson opts to play neither of these. And I think he's going to go throw that hat in the trash as he gets up from the table. I do agree. Throwing away that hat, likely the highest simming move. So good choice by Jackson to get rid of it as well. Carl now ANNOPTT. And Jackson curiously not playing on top of Odor. Does that mean to me that maybe he's fishing? Or what? Why didn't you play on top of Odor, Jackson? Do you want this board to stay open? Did you want that line to stay open? I don't know what Carl should read out of that, but he does need to figure out a way to respond.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think Jackson must be spotting the number of eyes left or something, although a lot of eyes have been played. So that was my immediate instinct to keep the G there would mean you like the NG combination. But yeah, I'm not sure immediately what the thought process was there.
Carl has a top on top of Odor, ATOP. The PO that he would play there does have 2 significant front hooks, both an A and a U. And after Jackson's made a small play like this, I don't know that I want to open bingo lines. At the same time, I'm only up 4. I can't be super scared of a bingo when I need to score points or I'm just going to get straight outrun in this game. This is a really tough turn for Carl and one that will have huge ramifications down the road. I do not know what to do, but perhaps Panto and JO is another play he could consider. I'm so curious what Jackson's going to draw. But the rules say if you do need to walk away from the table for any reason, go use the bathroom, anything like that, the only way you can do it is after you make a play, you press your clock, you do not draw your tiles, so you can't anagram your upcoming rack. And your opponent free to take their time, finish their turn, and your clock will run until you're back. And only at that point can you draw your tiles. So Carl maybe could put a little time pressure on Jackson, but Jackson back just in the nick of time. Carl electing Panto, as I suggested, and a huge draw here for Jackson. AGLNS, will he get an I? Will he get an E? Will he pick up 2 consonants? E, E. All right, so a good balanced rack for Jackson into that pull, as AEEGLNS is his rack. And while he won't bingo now, he is still very close to a bingo.
Yeah, that play looks very good from Carl. I mean, the pool, even though there's no blanks left, there's definitely some decent tiles, and so I don't think it's a problem to play long there at all. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this unfolds. I mean, that was a very astute play to not really open dangerous bingo lines. Sending in a P or an A aren't the most probable eight-letter words.
Jackson has an awesome play here. It only scores 7. It is dropping his E behind KA. Jackson with the final S, and knowing that spot will be his, or making Carl form or do a big sacrifice to block that spot. Jackson will probably see this opportunity and go through tile by tile to determine which tile draws will pull a bingo that fits in that spot, but also in other spots. But Jackson potentially could take that S and make it very powerful on a board where otherwise it does not do very much for him. Morris, do you like KAE, or do you just want to score some points here?
Yeah, looking at the pool, I'm not sure how good that actually is. I mean, we see, right, the E is the most common tile in the pool, but he needs to play off an E here because I don't think there are any words with the E as the seventh. I guess with an A, you could have things like enlages. But yeah, for a lot of the tiles in this pool, I'm not sure how fruitful this is going to be. It definitely hits some portions of it, right? There's like mangles and tangles and things like that, and anglers. But yeah, my guess is it's less than 50% of the pool quickly glancing at it. So it really becomes a question, is 7 points worth basically a coin flip to get the bingo?
I mean, even if he misses a bingo this turn without many scoring opportunities, maybe he just tries again next turn. Jackson will bingo into AEGLNS blank if he draws an A, an I, an M, let's see, an R, a T, and a W, as well as a U. So about 50% for Jackson to hit here. And he does exactly what I said he was going to do. Man, I know Jackson's game well, but oof, another E is his draw. It is a most common tile in the pool, but Carl doesn't know that Jackson has missed. Jackson sipping his coffee is at a tell of confidence or a tell of nervousness. And Carl's got to respond. Does he block? Does he ignore? Does he do? I really don't know. Does he try to respond with his own bingo? Do you see any way that Carl can block that makes sense, Morris?
So I mean, he could go to the R in diehards, right? So like inner is a pretty definitive block there. Uh, Something like that. I'm wondering though, the other option here is Carl has the X. He could, if he thinks Jackson's going to bingo, is there some way to set up a huge X play that Jackson has to think about? Do I block the X play? Do I get my bingo now? So I'd be thinking about that too. Often when I think my opponent's bingoing, my response is, okay, you're going to get 70 points. I'll get 50 points at least.
So Carl just this is the beauty of a play like KAE. Even if it doesn't work, you force Carl to make a huge sacrifice to address it. So Carl dropping IN and IBIS, EINTX. The X is okay on this board, but not exceptionally powerful. And now we're back, Jackson, with the same rack as last turn, though now bingos are going to be harder to hit. He'll need a good fit under Odor if that line even stays available. You could fish an E again here. CEE is 10. But in the absence of good bingo opportunities and with the expectation that Carl's going to try to block up this board a little bit, I don't know that Jackson can justify fishing a second time here.
Yeah, this is a tough spot. I mean, the problem with having these bingo prone letters is when they don't bingo, your scoring options are just so limited, right? So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Jackson tries to shape these next few turns.
I think one big concern in this game, and this has happened over and over in Scrabble, is perhaps this game's not going to come down to who bingos first, but who ends up drawing the cue The Q already looking obnoxious on this board. There is an unseen U and one unseen I for Jackson, but the Q is going to be very tough to get rid of if Jackson pulls it here. And Carl is going to have a hard time as well. I don't see many ways to play that tile except QI and OI underneath Odor, QAID
Carl
maybe.
has liquor.
No, Carl would have liquor if he draws it and retains LIO on his rack, but Carl
Yeah.
with the last I and the last O right now, I don't know. I think this game might come down not to who bingos, but who draws that Q and ends up being forced to score almost nothing to play it. The Q and the U together could be good, but the Q alone could be huge trouble for whichever one of these players ends up picking it.
Yeah, no, it's a very astute point, and I think that is likely the key story to monitor these last few turns of the game. Um, Although having the U out in the bag will make it easy, likely for one of them at least, if they draw both the Q and the U. I think we saw that in the game with Josh versus Rafi. Rafi got the Q at the end, and he was going to lose anyway, but he also had the blank, so he was easily able to get rid of the Q because of that. So, yeah, if you're drawing the Q, you're hoping the U is with it too.
One other thing to consider with the speed with which IN and IBIS came down from Carl, if I'm Jackson, I can read Carl's got that last I. Q is going to be big trouble without a U. Jackson needs to dodge it here, and he does, as now play passes to Carl, who will need to shed this X, but actually fairly likely to draw the Q. There are now 7 tiles in the bag, 14 unseen to Carl. You can see the unseen pool there, but the Q more and more dangerous as this game goes on.
Oh, but he might be doing a setup here. Uh, right? I think since there's no Fs or Ps, he has the last I. I think Lex is his plan to give him Ilex, and Flex and Plex are no longer in play. At least I think that's what's going through his head right now.
The issue is an Ilex play from Carl could lead to a Silex play back from Jackson, which would be killer. But Carl picking up the Q now, Ilex and QI, or LI and QI, both options as well. And now Jackson going to have to deal with the setup from Carl after Lex. Definitely a creative play. He now needs to dodge the Q, and he does not. There it is. And other clunky tiles to go with it. Because he set it up, he'll have Ilex. I'm not sure how Jackson will respond to this, but QI and Ilex will give Jackson big plays with Silex in response. This is a tight one, folks. 25 points, Jackson to play, Carl with the Q to unload, 4 tiles in the bag. Does Jackson get aggressive and open this board to try to bingo with a nice leave? Does Jackson try to deal with the setup? And it looks like Jackson is going to hold AEERS. Great leave with just 4 vowels in the bag. He's likely to pick up consonants here. And Carl going to be forced now to make probably his Q dump in play. ILNORTQ for Carl. And QI and Ilex looks to be just about the only choice he's got.
Well, the other thing to look for in these sorts of positions is Carl knows that spot is available to him. So if there are any plays that make another Q spot that are also good, he might just have both spots and delay giving the Silex hook to Jackson. So I'm not seeing something right away, but I definitely would look at things where I would still score with some of the other letters on my rack and keep 2 QI spots next turn.
Carl's got to make big inferences about Jackson's play. If Jackson, without much thought, plays VA, what does that mean that he's holding? You can make those kind of inferences. But Carl going to play QI not with Ilex, but with LI, foregoing 11 points, but stopping Jackson from playing Silex. Perhaps Carl correctly reading that Jackson did have that S and wouldn't let him set it up. But Jackson now 7 tiles, a 22-point deficit. He'll need to try to find an end game that wins this game for him. And I don't know that that is possible, as Carl's got some high scoring opportunities. That O is going to give Carl big plays on top of Glenn, Wed, Ono, and Wart, for instance. It looks like, even with optimal endgame, this is going to be Carl's game by a slim margin, but Jackson going to do everything he can to try to find his highest scoring out in two sequence.
Yeah, that was really astute by Carl to realize just how devastating Silex is here. Because it's really hard for Jackson even play off many tiles. He has remap set up right now, I think, or maybe reman, I'm not sure. But yeah, it's like that would have just given Jackson so much flexibility in the end game. Really, hats off to Carl there. I guess Jackson, the hats off was off Carl's head and on Jackson's head, I guess we could say. But yeah, this will be interesting to see how Jackson proceeds, even though it seems like a lost game for him.
Running this through Quackle, it does look like QI in either spot narrowly hangs on to win, but simply because Jackson missed a bingo last turn on his pull. Had Carl played Silex, Jackson could hit him back with a play like Smear, but Jackson would go on to lose by 4 points in this iteration with the tiles Carl has drawn. Jackson doesn't know yet that he's been beaten, but he's going to spend every remaining second on his clock trying to find out in two sequence. We might even see one of the good old-fashioned unchallengeable phonies, as Carl could not challenge the word and win the game. But I don't see a win for Jackson. Quackle doesn't see a win for Jackson, unless Macondo able to think of something that we don't think of. I believe this is Carl's game, and that is going to make this tournament very, very spicy.
Yeah, we already see a spectator in the background behind Carl's shoulder, trying to gauge what's happening in this game.
That appears to
One
be
thing to
Chris
note
Cree.
for Macondo versus Quackle, in these situations, Quackle should be pretty good. Macondo far exceeds Quackle with a one in the bag end game right now, but even though Quackle has some bugs in the end game, it's pretty good. So my guess is if Quackle's not finding anything here, Macondo likely won't either. Although I'll let the chat correct me if so.
Wild game, lots of interesting choices. And while we didn't see fireworks, one bingo from Jackson, two from Carl, but a low scoring game, we saw lots of tactical decision making from both players trying to deal with this tight board. And I predicted that the Q would be a game loser, but the clever setup of Carl, LAX, if I draw the Q, I can play it. I hold on to the O to play on top of Oh no, just barely going to be enough for Carl to hang on and win this game.
Yeah, this was I think overall like the only thing that I thought I guess Zeros versus Zoya's very tiny mistake. Really, I think just the hat choice. That was my one bad equity play here. Other than that, I think everything was pretty excellently played.
And then Chris Cree standing in the background, of course, from Texas himself, very typical Southerner. And I think Chris perhaps trying to get his hat back off Jackson's head.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess were there any hat words for the chat that you wish or hope get played on stream in the next two games? That'd be a fun little question to ask.
So we're getting word in chat
Yeah.
that Kevin Fraley has won his game, and with the loss from Jackson here, barring an inexplicable meltdown from Carl, that'll put Kevin one game back with two to go. It will be very interesting to see how the other games shake out and how the pairings go, but I suspect Jackson will be paired with one person 2 games behind him, and if Kevin wins his game, he'll have a situation where he just needs to win and he'll get the opportunity to play Jackson for a spot in the finals. Jackson is playing remap here for 18 points. That is not going to be enough to win the game, as it gives Carl WOT back on top for 25, or WON as well. So Carl looks like he will narrowly hang on to win this game.
Yeah, and yeah, this was an excellent game, but I guess Carl, if Kevin won, I don't know if other players with similar better records than Carl also won, but maybe he might be out of contention even though he won. It'd be interesting to see. At a minimum, though, he's played the ultimate spoiler, beating Jackson twice today now, or likely beating Jackson twice today now. I'll let him execute the win here before speaking too soon.
Yeah, if Carl does play Watt as he's got it lined up here, he will not guarantee himself an out next turn. Always dicey. You always want to try to go out in 2 if possible. But Watt on top of Remat scores so well that even despite going out or not going out, Jackson won't be able to dink and dunk and outrun him. You think with that S, perhaps he could score enough points by pluralizing the word somewhere, but it's not quite in the cards. If Jackson or if Carl plays WOT, he can hang on to win. Even with the play like WORT on top of Glenn, he'll hold on to win by 3.
Yeah, and I'm seeing in the chat someone just said, I never watched TWL games. Very cool setup attempts and strategic play. I find that's often the case in TWL. There's a lot of board dynamics coming into play when, right, if there are just less bingos played, often those sort of tactical positions come up a bit more often. Not saying one's better than the other, but yeah, I think that's part of the fun of watching these sorts of maneuverings.
Yeah, Collins so often can form just shoot, run and gun kind of games, and those are certainly fun as well. But a little bit more defense, a little bit more common in NWL games. So for those of you CSW viewers tuning in, fewer options means you have to be a little bit more crafty at times with your play.
Yeah, and I think both can learn from each other, certainly. Like I think you can definitely right. There's a reason Nigel Richards is the best at both games. There is definitely overlap in their concepts that a lot of great players in either dictionary emphasize that if a complete player took from both, you'd be pretty awesome.
So we will get our team on the ground ready. There's always great post-game banter after these games, though as the stakes get higher and emotions get tenser, perhaps players not willing to post boredom as they really just need to go reset their heads, throw away their hats, and get ready for the next game. We will get Christian ready, though, as Jackson's set to make an outplay pretty quickly, and we'll get you that post-game banter as soon as we can.
$75, $90? Yeah. Good game. Yeah, it was an intense one. Feel that tension.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Ball was good.
What was that?
Ball was good. Nice play.
Thank you.
Like a few plays that will lose you the game.
Yeah.
If you're not careful.
If I maybe played some
Yeah, just have that whoa or something.
Yeah, right.
I wonder if I'd have win. I didn't see anything at one straight
it's such
up.
a tough game, and you're out of time, and I definitely did talk myself about QI not going here with the
I mean, that's good.
Yeah, can't do it. But yeah. Oh man, it's a very, very tight game. Just it was intense. Yeah.
Interesting.
That was just for sure.
When you played in, did you have a good rack?
No, I had EN. I was undoubling, and I had EINTX. So I really didn't know what to do. I mean, this obviously you have bingos there.
Yeah.
But I don't want this to stay here the whole time. And I mean, I could do X. I don't know. Do mix, I guess.
No, I mean, this is good.
Yeah.
On Glenn, like I was thinking of making a forking play of ale, which really you can't block. You can't block both.
Right.
But I was thinking maybe we were kind of fishing within to counter bingo, so I got a bit spooked with doing that.
Yeah, this is one for the sim. I had so many weird decisions. I wasn't even sure if this was good.
Diametric?
Yeah, it sounds good. It looks fine. But
I never even questioned it.
I didn't question it either. I'm pretty.
Yeah, it's good.
It's good. Okay. Yeah, see, I had a point where after so many games, it's hard to. Yeah. My brain turns to mush, you know. So, 15-point game, 390, 275.
Yeah. Try.
Oof.
Yeah, I think I had like one easy turn. I didn't just invest.
What?
I think invest was the only clear play. Every other play was very interesting.
Yeah.
A tough decision.
I had the blank. I had.
With the blank.
Yeah, I had DEI blank left with that. I didn't see anything. I saw lots and lots of 8s, like alkoxide and goat-like and colloidal. Yeah, right.
Kilo what? You said?
Colloidal, yeah.
What was the other one you said?
Goat-like and toad-like.
Goat.
Yeah, I saw a whole bunch like that. Oak-like with a D in place of a K. Yeah. Inoki Dake through, yeah, Inoki Take too. T-O-R-T. Guess we've been doing it this way too.
That was nice. Good play.
Thank you. Yeah. With the case I, it was, I felt pretty happy about that. I didn't do the Q, and I was like, from you wouldn't just block over there. I don't think I had a place with a Q if you played over there somewhere.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing I didn't even kind of get into too much in my head is the Q. Like,
right, and that was another reason for playing short. I didn't want to draw it myself.
Yeah.
All right, well, it looks like our post-game banter just about over as they get the results slip in, and they're going to start resquaring the tiles. We're hearing from chat that both Joey Malik and Kevin Fraley, who were 2 games back of Jackson, won their games. So I anticipate the pairings will be that Joey and Kevin play each other. The winner of that will remain 1 game behind Jackson, who will play the highest rated player, or highest seeded player rather, 2 games behind him. That player with the chance to play spoiler, and the winner of Kevin Joey with the chance to try to knock off Jackson to get in. Not sure exactly. We'll have to take a little bit more time, get every single result in to see where these standings are. But things got very interesting as Jackson may now need to go 2-0 across his next 2 games with his loss combined with both a Kevin and a Joey victory. This is anybody's race to win at this point. We will hold on. We'll wait for every single game to be submitted before we get to the next round's pairing. So perhaps about 5 or 6 minutes, maybe even longer, before we get you the next game. Again, this is the Scrabble Players Championship, brought to you by NASPA from Las Vegas, Nevada. We have 2 more games before pulling the top 2 players away for a best of 5 finals tomorrow. Josh Sokol already clinching one of those, and a tight race for the second spot. We're going to step away for just a moment as these results come trickling in. You guys watching, don't go anywhere. We will be back in a few short minutes with 2 more dicey, intense, high-stakes games of Scrabble. Until then, stay tuned.